listening to the Go and Tell Gals podcast, and I'm your host, Jess Conlon. In most of our episodes, we'll have a guest, a woman who is running on mission right where she's at. We pray this podcast leaves you encouraged and spurred on to go and tell the good news. Hey friends, you are going to love today's episode. We are talking to Nona Jones. We're really talking about our stories and about how our past do not determine our present or the impact of our future. No matter what your past is like, no matter what your story is like, I want to just invite you to listen in this episode, hear what truth God has for you in it, be blessed, be encouraged, and definitely give Nona a follow on social media. Friends, I have been looking forward to this interview, this episode for months. I am so excited. If you do not already know Nona Jones, I am so excited to introduce you to her. Hey, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I've been super excited myself, so this is so cool.
So genuinely, I want to say this. A lot of times, if people ask like, hey, who are you following on Instagram right now that you like or that's inspiring you? I have to say, genuinely right now, following you on Instagram is one of the most life-giving things. You are giving it on the gram.
Wow. Wow.
You are bringing the life and the wisdom and the truth, and I am grateful for it.
Oh, that means so much coming from you. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now listen, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to start with your bio. I will have already introed you and told people about you, but I'm not going to start with your bio because I don't want anyone to feel intimidated. It's an incredible bio. It's incredible. It's incredible. But I do want you to just tell us a little bit about what mission looks like in your life. And I know some of the bio will come out in that.
Wow. Mission for me, because I had such a tumultuous childhood, experienced a lot of abuse of all kinds, just a lot of hopelessness, tried to commit suicide when I was 9 and 11 years old, and yet was able to find hope and healing eventually. For me, mission is about turning pain into purpose and realizing that the things that happened in my past, even though no one would want them to happen to them and I wouldn't wish them on anyone, I believe that there are so many people that need to know that there is hope.
Yeah.
There's hope. There is redemption. And so, that's mission for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So your new book, Success from the Inside Out, is about to come out, but you are not just an author. Right now, currently, can you tell a little bit about your day job and then also your mission job? Because you also pastor a church, correct?
Yeah. Have a very full life. I was actually thinking about this at the end of 2019, getting ready to cross over into 2020. And I was looking at every different aspect of my life. And I was like, that's a lot. My day job, I get to lead global faith-based partnerships at Facebook. So I get to work with pastors, influencers, denominations, organizations that are doing great work around the world through a faith lens in order to help them use Facebook for ministry, which is awesome. And I actually, it's so funny. I was telling somebody about this the other day and they were like, oh, okay, so you work on Facebook. I said, no, I actually work for Facebook. They were like, oh. So that's what I do in my day job. But my husband and I we lead a church together in Florida. And funny enough, my team is based in California, but I live in Florida. And that was actually part of my requirements when I accepted the role, as I said I wasn't moving because I didn't want to leave our church. And then I get to also preach and teach the word around the world. I get to travel a lot, which is awesome. And I'm a mommy to 2 little boys. And like you said, I'm an author now. So
yeah.
A whole lot going on.
So the reason why Success from the Inside Out is so incredible, the reason why you guys have got to read it, the reason why if you are not already following Nona on Instagram, you have to go right now is because this incredible message coming up and out of you that really speaks so much life to the truth that your circumstances do not define your success, your capacity even. And I have to say, like, it's so wildly inspiring to me as someone who, I mean, even as an author, even as someone who teaches the word, even as someone leading a church, I just constantly can fight the temptation to believe that I missed some very important step along the way.
Yeah.
That my personal past, my brokenness, my hidden stuff is what's going to disqualify me rather than be the absolute fuel to the fire of my mission.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's honestly, it's so funny when I was even reading your book, which is incredible and amazing. I feel like there are so many women who, because of past pain, past disappointments, even past failures, they feel like, you know what? I cannot be used. I'm damaged goods, and therefore I'm not worthy. And yet God created us worthy. He created us worthy, knowing what was going to happen to us as well as what we were going to do. And yet he created us worthy. And so I felt like in writing this book that there was a need for people to know that you are worthy. And I think my own struggle had always been, because of the trauma of my past, I was chasing success, external affirmation. I was an executive at a very early age. At the age of 23, I got into this really big role, and my career blossomed from there. And I found myself in rooms with people who were incredibly powerful, and I took a lot of worth from that, and I took a lot of validation from that. But I realized something, which is the more success you achieve, the more you realize there is to achieve. It never ends. So, let's say you become the vice president, right? Like, I want to be the vice president of whatever. So you become the vice president. Well, there's a CEO role, and you're like, well, I want to be the CEO. So you become the CEO. And then it's like, oh, I want to be on the board of directors. Then you get on the board of directors, and it's like, oh, but there are other board of directors that make more money. And so it just never ends. And I came to that realization, which is why I wrote the book, because I really want people to understand that success begins within. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have that internal grounding, that internal anchor rooted in the identity that God has created you to be from the beginning of time, you're going to find yourself drifting in this vast sea of never ending. I need applause. I need validation. I need likes. I need followers. And it just never ends. And so my hope is that people will see in this book the ability to have peace and the ability to be comfortable in who you are and know that God doesn't make mistakes or extras. Yeah. And so knowing that, you can rest in who you are.
So good. Okay, I didn't really prep you for this question, but in talking about these truths, in reading your book and in processing it myself, it's been really interesting. We're at the beginning of 2020. We've just gone through the onslaught of people spending the last month on social media talking about their last 10 years. And I have felt so drawn in to think about the last decade in my life. I started 2010, a very, very, very broke stay-at-home mom, literally, using an EBT card to buy my family's groceries and staying in keeping my 3 kids under 3 in a basement apartment of a friend's house because that's all we could afford. And sharing a car with my husband, sharing a computer with my husband, forget having my own phone. Like, we weren't there. We weren't there yet, really genuinely feeling like I had to speak abundance over my own life. I had to speak God's power and purpose over my own life, or nobody else was going to, because it was so broken. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting for me is that at the beginning of 2020, I have wrestled with a lot of almost like nostalgia, borderlining on like missing that season, missing the small hidden season where no one cared what I did. And I know the truth of that. I know that now I get to serve, just a host of other people because I've come out of that basement apartment. And I'm really grateful for the platforms that I have. And that gratitude is really about all that keeps me using them, or else I would just, crawl back into the basement and live a small life there. But will you speak a little bit about the last 10 years for you and how this story has evolved? And I'm just curious how you felt with 2020 hitting and a book coming out and being in such an incredible place in your career. How did you feel about 2010?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. In 2010, I was 6 years out of college, and my husband and we got married a month after I graduated from college, and we had been married for about a little over 5 years then. I was pregnant with our first son, and I remember being in just a really funky place, because I had classmates who had went on to law school or medical school, and many of them had graduated with these super impressive degrees. And I had gotten an MBA. I was actually in a really good corporate role at that time. But I remember comparing myself to them in a way where I just felt like I was behind the curveball. I remember that vividly. And I also remember I was extremely overweight at that point, not even just because I was pregnant, but I had actually gone into pregnancy overweight. And so I just felt really, really bad. And I remember that year was a year of just feeling depressed because I was looking around at everybody else's life. And I was like, man, look at all these people. I remember a friend of mine had twin girls that year, and she looked like she wasn't even, like she never had a child like 2 days after she had them. And yet people were still asking me, when was I going to have my son, like 3-4 months later,
right
after I had him. So I was just in a really funky place. But, when I reflect back on it now, I also remember that was kind of a turning point. Like I remember getting to a place between 2010 and 2011 that I just really felt like I was tired of feeling bad. I was just so tired of feeling bad. And I think I got to a place where I just started to pursue God in a very tangible, visceral way, because I was like, Lord, you've blessed me with so much. And yet here I am just feeling so depressed when I really should be blessed. And the Lord just began to speak to me. And he told me, I remember this so clearly. He said, you don't feel bad because you lack. You feel bad because of your comparison.
Yep.
And I was like, oh. And so that became a turning point for me. And I remember making the decision that I was going to stop comparing my start to other people's finish. And that became the year that I decided I was going to live my life for me. And so between 2010 and truly 2019, the end of 2019, I really became more clear on who I was and who I was called to be. And that's around the time that I actually started to speak very publicly about the abuse I suffered as a child. And I began to share my story. And what I found is that there were so many people who had been through the same thing and they had never told anybody. So I began to just reclaim this identity, and I began to reclaim the sense of power over my past. And so I look back on it now with gratitude, even though I felt so bad and so depressed, and I just felt like I didn't really matter, didn't have purpose. I look back on it now and I'm like, man, that was the fork in the road where the Lord spoke to me in such a clear way, letting me know that I had purpose and I had identity. And I will tell you, the book, even though I didn't know it then, the book really was born out of that inflection point.
Yep.
When I realized, because I was in a great job then, traveling around the country, doing really important work for the company I was working for, but I still didn't feel valuable.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I mattered. And so, that became an inflection point for me. And I look back on it now with so much gratitude, just recognizing where God has brought me from.
I love that. I think that articulates for me a lot of what I'm feeling about that basement apartment. that the abundance and the freedom and the healing that took place when I started to decide in the most broken circumstances that God was mighty in me. And that he could use even me, and that he wanted to, and that he delighted in it. like that moment of freedom and abundance was so profound that it shifted and changed everything for the next decade. And the same for you, right? The moment when you said, like, you know what, I'm gonna actually tell this story. I'm gonna love God enough to take care of my body. You know, I mean, that shifted everything. And so right now, you know, I personally love to watch your workouts. That's another great reason to follow Nona on Instagram. Like, we could just look and see we could see the Instagram workouts. We could see the travel. We could see the stage stuff and not know the true obedience and freedom, which is why your book is so good, because I want people to find those same points for themselves.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, and it's funny. I've had people say to me, "You're so brave for telling your story. That takes so much courage." And yet I have discovered that it's so important that we're honest about our challenges, we're honest about our struggles, because there are so many other people who are experiencing the same thing, and they just think that they're alone. They think they're unique. They think that they're the only one. And so that's part of the reason why I share so much of my life with people, is I want them to know, like, no, really, you're not alone. You're not defective.
Right.
You're not inadequate. You're just a human being struggling with human stuff.
Yeah.
But there is a God who has all grace and all power, and he can change our situations. He can even change our understanding of who we are. And so that's my hope for this book.
So good. Okay, you guys have got to get the book, but as you said, you're in a season where life is very full. You've got a lot on your plate. What are the main challenges that you're facing in that fullness, or are there challenges outside of just what you've got on your plate? And how is God meeting you in those?
I think the challenge for me right now is, and what is probably going to be my challenge for the rest of my life, is just being at peace with where I am and what I have. Because it goes back to what I said before, like, the more you achieve, the more you realize there is to achieve. And so the more that the Lord has done in my life, the more I've been exposed to, and I'm like, oh, I want to do that too. And it's like, no, God hasn't called me to that. And he hasn't graced me for that. And so I think the biggest challenge for me right now is being content with where I'm at and what I'm doing, and not feeling the need to add more to my plate because of what other people are doing. There's that piece, and I think there's the other piece, keeping my priorities straight. I had a talk with God at the end of the year where I was like, Lord, I really want to make sure that as I go into 2020, that I don't lose sight of you, and that I don't lose sight of my family, and I don't lose sight of my local church because of all the other noise of life. And so my biggest challenge right now is just keeping everything straight, you know? I think as doors open, it's so easy to let your priorities get out of whack. And so I'm just trying to keep everything right on the shelf that needs to be on.
I love it. So good. So good. And are there certain tools or tips or tricks or anything, even an app that's really serving you in this season that we could give to the women who so are trying to balance everything that God's given them to do as well?
Oh, yeah. So something I started doing years ago is every quarter, I like to set aside a day or two, and I just call it my quarterly thinking day, where I chart out, you know, every area of my life. So, for example, I'll say my work at Facebook, my work in my evangelistic ministry, my work at my local church, my family, etc. I look at every single area of my life and I list out, okay, what is the goal for this area of my life? What's the most important thing right now that I need to focus on in this area? And then what are all of the different things that I'm doing? So what are all the meetings I'm having about it? What are all the projects I'm working on? Who are all the people that are involved? And then I look at, okay, based on everything I'm doing and based on the goal and what's most important, what's the next thing I need to do in order to move this thing along? And so it just gives me an opportunity to just step back and really take inventory of what all is on my plate. And the beauty of it is, not only does it help me think clearly, it also helps me to what I call strategically abandon the things that are on my plate that are no longer serving the goal.
Wow.
Because sometimes what we do is we add more to our plate, but we never take anything off.
Yep.
And so we end up stressed and frustrated. And so what I do is when I list everything out, I'll just mark through things that no longer serve the purpose of the goal. It really helps me to keep everything straight. And it also gives me peace. Because, I feel like I'm the kind of person, I have to have a bit of control over my life to have peace. But when we don't take the time to step back and think, we can start to feel out of control because we don't know what's going on. We're just going from thing to thing to thing to thing without any strategy, any focus, any intention. So that's what I do. Quarterly thinking days, just a time to sit back and think and plan.
So good. I love that. Friends, Success from the Inside Out is a book you are going to want to read. And I have a feeling, honestly, it's going to be a book you want to buy for a friend or two, just to continually encourage them to not only hear this incredible story, but to find these markers in their own story that are going to help them move towards success and whatever that looks like for them, whatever breakthrough and goals God's called them to. But in the meantime, Nona, how can we be praying for you? How can we be praying for this book launch and this message?
Wow. The prayer that I think I need most right now is just clarity. There are so many voices because, as I said, there's so many things I have going on. There's so many voices in my life and so many voices in my head all the time that I need to make sure that I clearly hear from God in everything that I do. So clarity would be wonderful. And then relative to the book, I'm just praying that the message would reach to the four corners of the earth.
Yeah.
I do believe that there are people, and part of the reason why I wrote this book is statistically right now, suicide is the highest in high income countries, in the place where there's the most ambition, there's frankly the most success, there's the most wealth. I wrote this book because people like that need to know that you are not your achievements, you are not your resume. You have been created with purpose, on purpose by God. And so I'm praying that this message would reach the four corners of the earth so that people will choose life instead of believing that their value is only as much as what they achieve. So that would be my prayer, and I would really appreciate that.
Absolutely. We agree with that prayer. God, take this message as absolutely far as you can. Get it in as many homes, on as many Kindles, and as many libraries and coffee shops and spaces that you can. And also, give our friend clarity and vision as she shares the message. In Jesus' name. Hey, thank you. I know you have got so much on your plate. It is such a gift to get to talk with you and talk a little bit more about this book. I'm so grateful for you, for your words, and I am crazy grateful to be in the kingdom of God at the same time that you are.
Thank you. And thank you for your ministry. You truly are a blessing to me and everyone that you're connected to.
Thank you, friend.